Welcome once again back to the lab. It is your old Professor Pilk, and of course, we need to talk about the incoming Pokemon Direct that will be here in a little under 24 hours. There is a lot that we can kind of surmise is coming from this. Now, first things first, Pokemon Legends ZA. A lot of us have been hyped about this for a really long time. Obviously, this is going to harken back to the Pokemon Legends Arceus type of gameplay, but we're going back to an older region, and obviously we're going to dip more into like the city life here. Whereas in Legends Arceus, we got a lot of the wilds and the history and things like that. This, I believe, if I recollect from the details we got before, is all going to be focused around the city life and things like that, which would be really interesting how that kind of pertains to Pokemon and things like that. I just got done playing Sword and Shield, so it's going to be really, because that one had a lot of the city-like elements to it, so I think they're going to take some cues from that, obviously some cues from X and Y, and we're going to get this big, I would almost expect it to be very cinematic in scale. However, I personally was hoping this would be a Switch 2 release, and it seems like this is confirmed to be a Switch release. So I have said I do feel like it'll play better on the Switch 2, but I'm a little leery about it because I do feel like the original Switch is kind of coming to a critical impasse in what it can actually graphically do. And that was very evident in Scarlet and Violet. So I'm a little leery about that. I kind of feel like most people are going to find this a lot more enjoyable on the new Switch hardware that is coming shortly. So that said, I would not be shocked if we got some details about maybe a Switch 2 game coming shortly, because Nintendo's already kind of released that information, sort of. We have a little bit of something. We'll get more of that come April, but until then, they've admitted that it's happening. They've admitted that it's coming. So Pokemon could talk about a new Switch 2 game coming soon. But going back to Legends ZA specifically, this is going to be a really exciting game, but it is not going to play like your typical Pokemon game. This is going to be it's going to be more like Legends Arceus, but like I said, city-oriented rather than kind of like historically and wooded and all that. So it'll be a lot of fun, really interesting. Now, the big one that I know everybody's really excited about is the return of Mega Evolutions. And I will not lie, I'm also really excited about that. Now, specifically when it pertains to Mega Evolutions, essentially what this is if you're not familiar with Mega Evolutions, maybe you're new to the franchise or just want a refresher, essentially what a Mega Evolution is it's another like temporary evolution on top of the top Evo that will add some stats or will change typings. It's kind of like, it's like just a better version of Gigantamax and Terastallization, but once again, just like those two versions, it is pretty temporary. So you don't get to, and usually in a game that introduces it, at least the official games, you don't generally get to have one of the evolutions per match. They might change that here. I know if you play some of the mods and things like that, you can catch them in the wild in the evolution. But in these, you have to have the items to actually mega evolve them. And most Pokemon get one Mega Evolution, but we do have units like Charizard and Mewtwo, those two specifically, that do have two different types of Mega Evolutions for two different purposes. But like I said, the main thing is these Mega Evolutions will either improve a stat, add a typing, or any combination thereof. In the case of this Typhlosion, now this is a fan rendering, I guess you could say, of what the Mega Evolution would look like, but in this particular circumstance, he looks a little more bulky. I wouldn't be surprised if they added maybe some defensive stats or, maybe gave him a new typing because it looks like his fire is a little different. Remember back to his Hisuian Typhlosion, he added the ghost typing, and so we could even get something different here. It's really hard to say, but Mega Evolutions are really, really, really interesting, and the return of that is something the fans have wanted for a very long time. And I would not be shocked to see some Gen 10 Mega Evolution, or sorry, Gen 9 Mega Evolutions. So case in point, I don't think Tinkaton's going to look like this, but I think this person absolutely nailed what a Tinkaton Mega Evolution would look like. Because if you know anything about Tinkaton, typically the Mon doesn't change. Go back to the shiny Tinkaton, where the Mon herself doesn't change, just her hammer changes. Everything's about that hammer, to the point where the shiny, same base Tinkaton, just has a shiny hammer made out of shiny Corviknights, which is just super cool. And of course, there are some Mega Evolutions that people have wanted for eons. Case in point, this Greninja. Now, this is actually based on the Ash Greninja, but Ash Greninja itself is kind of a weird form that only comes from a certain typing. And what they could do is they could kind of tie that into a Mega Evolution. Because if I'm honest, Scarlet and Violet completely squandered Battle Bond. And this would give an opportunity to maybe introduce that as a Mega Evolution that then maybe adds a little something on top of it, adds, different typing or improves stats a little bit. Battle Bond is one of those things that could be way, way better in Legends EA than it ever was in Scarlet and Violet. So, just another option that is on the table. So for the question of when will Legends EA drop, we don't know. I think at this point we can surmise it's probably going to be at least 2 months, give or take. The Switch 2 information will be coming here in April. I would not be surprised if it dropped between now and then, but they're going to want to give people time to pre-order this and to ship it and, all that good stuff. And best of my knowledge, we haven't had any leaks from GameStop and places like that have already gotten copies or even have the SKUs for them, where we already have peripherals and SKUs for Switch 2 stuff. So that being that, they could hold this off until as late as June or July. But with the other information we have, I don't think it'll be any later than that. Well, I know a lot of these usually drop in August to, in Scarlet and Violet's case, November. The original Legends Arceus dropped in January, which is way different. And for all we know, they could be it'll be on shelves next week. We just do not know. But I'm going to surmise probably May or June would make a lot of sense, I do think. And in that same vein, that does bring me to the other games that we've kind of heard teasers of, quote-unquote leaks. I don't know how much I believe it, but a lot of people have talked about the potential for there being a Pokemon Classic. Now, Pokemon Classic basically would take the first 2, 3, maybe even 4 generations, put them on a singular Switch game, allow you to play it. Will there be a physical copy? Less likely that. More likely it'll be a digital download only. But there's a couple big things that do allude to this. Number one, we've known for a very long time that Red and Blue have been in the Game Boy emulator, just kind of locked behind some kind of a wall. Basically, they've been in there. A lot of data miners have found it, been able to play it, but it's just not been available to the general public. And that just maybe they were waiting for this, or they were waiting for some kind of exclusive thing. This is something that a lot of fans have wanted, that right now getting your hands on those classic games is next to impossible. Even the hardware is insanely expensive. I went down and hunted down a 2DS with the Virtual Console games and Pokemon Bank. And let me tell you, 2 years ago when I did that, it was already pricey, and the prices have just skyrocketed from there. So to release it, to have everyone be able to play it, would be awesome and makes a ton of sense. That said, when would this drop? And this is one of those things that is going to be a fan favorite, but I don't think this is going to sell like Scarlet and Violet or even Legends EA. This is something that is kind of a niche market thing. It'll still sell really well, millions and millions and millions of copies, but not quite on the same level as the other stuff we're talking about. So this could be like an August, September release type of situation. Now, that does mean bad news for one thing. If we are truly getting Pokemon Classic, you can get ready to say goodbye to Pokemon Bank. This app, we know the 3DS stores have already closed. It's been unavailable for a really long time. They now made it a free application that you can just transfer as long as you have a paid Pokemon Home account. Now, the one caveat to this is you can access your Pokemon Bank, folders, for lack of a better way to put it, boxes, through Pokemon Home's mobile app on your phone. So there is maybe some life left in this product, but being that I expect Pokemon Home to just transfer over to the Switch 2, during that transfer, I think a lot of people are going to lose access to Pokemon Bank. So for someone like me who's trying to finish my Shiny Living decks from the original generations, I dare say you're likely going to lose that capability very soon. In all likelihood, Pokemon Bank is probably on the chopping block. It probably has months left to live at best. I do not expect Pokemon Bank to be available by the end of the year, or at least going into 2026. So for those of you that are like me, you're trying to get your mon over, now is the time. Do not dawdle. Jump on this. Get those transfers done, because once it's gone, it's kind of gone. And I dare say if they're dropping a classic version, you can expect this to disappear soon too. Now, since we are talking a lot about physical games, there has been a lot of talk about Black and White 2 remakes. And I think with Legends Z Alpha coming, it's highly likely that we are looking at a new remake in the works. A lot of people have wanted to see these games for a long time. They are fan favorite games. But there's two reasons I might burst your bubble here. Number one, and I think the less problematic one, is the simple fact that they had sequel games. And so if you're going to release these, you would almost have to release them with the sequels tied in. And it's going to be exceptionally hard to do that and then still sell the game at $50-$60. They probably, if they were going to do that, then add the sequel games as like DLC or re-release them later on. But you're really talking about, instead of buying like, Pokemon Black or Pokemon White remake, you're talking about Pokemon Black, Pokemon White remake, and then the sequel remakes like 6 months to a year later on down the road, most likely as DLC. I don't think they would release those as physical games, just the way they do things nowadays. But you will be talking, instead of, a $60 to $120 investment, you could pretty much double that. So, possible. What I think they're going to do personally, now I want you to bear in mind that what we're getting is Legends ZA. And that kind of insinuates that it's more tied to X and Y than it is to Black and White. So for me, and for my input, quite frankly, personally, I think it makes more sense to drop this with the games that would accompany it. Case in point, we got BDSP, and then shortly after, we got Legends Arceus. And they kind of tie together very well. It makes a ton of sense. In fact, the games will unlock features of other games. If you have Legends Arceus, things happen in BDSP, such as you can encounter Arceus and things like that weren't even originally available in the original. Well, they were intended to be available. It just never happened. That's its own debacle. But I think this is what we're likely to see, and probably by the end of the year. So I'm calling that now. If we're getting remakes, end of the year, we might get remakes of X and Y. Now, are X and Y as well loved as Black and White or some of the other games? A lot of people like the Kalos region. I think it's a fantastic game. I recently played through it. I absolutely loved it. But I gotta say, I think Black and White, personally, from my experience, just has a higher fan base. But both of the games are well loved, absolutely adored. And being that, once again, we're getting Legends ZA, which X, Y, Z, and I think originally ZA was rumored to be Z Alpha, so Z to Alpha. It makes sense. And we got the character AZ in here that is still got like an unresolved storyline. There's so much more to expect. I don't think Black and White remakes are coming this year. Probably in a year or two. But you got to remember, are they going to drop a game that's going to demand $100+ out of you in the same year that they're dropping a Legends game and a potential classic game? No. They're going to drop a remake here, and well, they're not going to discount it, but if they're going to drop 4 games this year, it makes more sense to drop a solo game rather than a game with potential DLC later on down the road. Hot take, but that's my take on it. That's what I expect to see tomorrow. Now, I will say the vast majority of you have come here from my Scarlet and Violet content, and I could not talk about this without talking about the potential for shiny, legendary Scarlet and Violet Pokemon. And the way I kind of presume they're going to do this is probably because they've had their partnerships with GameStop and all that. We just had the Flying Eevee, and I know they did that with Black and White, or I'm sorry, with Sword and Shield. But I think it makes more sense to do this as raids. They've shown that the raids work. They've shown that the raids are popular. And quite frankly, it's easier to roll out on an international scale. So I would expect tomorrow they will probably announce shiny legendary raids, or even just regular legendary raids, coming to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And for those of you that do not have access to somebody that has another version of the game, let's say you bought Scarlet and you don't have Violet, and you don't have somebody to trade your ride on with,